Hey guys, welcome back. Today is April 28th, and this morning I woke up a little early and started chasing threads on the transmission case as well as the hydraulic reservoir, and let's see what else, transmission top cover, the axle housings. I'm gonna wait. These thread holes on the axle seal carrier caps aren't going to have to be chased because I sent them to sandblast with the bolts in place. But I might still do it just because. So why not, right? We're already doing everything else, so why not? But we're gonna work on getting the differential carrier, or I'm sorry, the ring and pinion carriers and the differential. Geez, I'm losing my train of thought here. I haven't had enough sleep, but we're gonna work on getting that stuff set up. And we kind of made not necessarily a critical error, but an error nonetheless when we tore everything apart. And I think maybe a big reason why I wasn't thinking when I did this is because I broke that pinion carrier housing. So these pinion carriers are shimmed. This is a stack of shims that I've got, but what I should have done when I took these apart was counted how many shims were on each one, because putting this back together now, since I don't know how many shims were there, I'm going to have to start with even numbers on both sides and slowly take them out until we got no side-to-side play in the differential assembly. And then I'm going to have to set up the lash on the pinion and ring gear. Now, if I would have counted how many shims were in each side, I would have probably been okay just putting it back exactly how it was. Because the issue now is, when I put this back together, without knowing how many shims are on each side originally, I'm not gonna, well, the gears are not new, so they already have a wear pattern established. Now, putting these back together with possibly a different amount of shims than what they came out with is going to put them into a different contact pattern, which is going to create some noise because they're going to have to wear in. I did contact Squatch, and I know he's probably watching this, but I'm not really sure the best way to go about this other than to start from scratch. So I referenced one of my videos before. I look back in the teardown videos, but it's just too hard to tell how many shims are in each carrier. And I think I'm probably going to start with maybe 4 on each side and see, maybe 5. It's better to start too loose than too tight because we're gonna have to take it back apart anyways. But let me just think here. If I start with 5 on each side and we got too much side to side play, then we take 1 out on each side, put it back together, and so forth until we take out all that side to side play. And chances are there's going to be some whine when we put this back together just because of that. But let's get set up here, and we'll start setting things up and go from there. So stay tuned. Alright guys, first things first. Before we can get the ring and pinion set up in the top shaft, we got to install the countershaft and the reverse gear. So what I'm going to do, because the reverse gear was the last thing to come out of the transmission case, I am going to install the reverse gear first. So Whoops. Let me grab the bolt here. I've got a light coating of oil on the shaft itself. The reverse idler gear has two different collars. The front side, the collar is a little bit longer than the rear. If you look here, okay, on the outside of the gears. But we got to slide the reverse idler into place, and then the shaft comes through the front of the transmission case. And slides back into, and I'll probably have to get my brass drift to seat it home, which, here, let me just set the bolt in there. Come through the front. See where we're at. Oop. Might have to grab a small punch and rotate the shaft a little until the bolt drops into place. Alright, reverse idler's in place. It turns beautifully. The bushings in the gear don't have hardly any play at all, which is great. Now is the challenging part, the countershaft. And if I remember correctly, the rear bearing had to be driven off prior to removal, and then the entire assembly slid backwards with the front bearing. And yeah, that's going to be how we get it off or how we install it. So I've already got the rear bearing on the countershaft here. So let me get that off, and then we will go from there. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is slide the shaft into place. And it's a very tight squeeze, but it is doable. So now that we've got the shaft in place, I believe we can install the bearings. Should be able to. So the front bearing, which is here, has a snap ring in it. Let me find the number. Should be on here somewhere. Well, I've got my index card. Why don't I use that? Holy cow, I think I left it inside. I'm totally unprepared. Okay, we're back. So the countershaft front or outer bearing is a ST246, or the equivalent is a 206L. So we're going to go ahead and install the front bearing. Get it started on the shaft. And the rear bearing for the countershaft is an ST202 or 209BB. We'll get that started on the rear portion. And I think what I will do is drive it in using the brass drift. So I think I'll start with the rear. If you guys can see that. And I'm just going to kind of hold the front one with my thigh. Just kind of working my way around until I can see that snap ring groove in the shaft. Not quite there, almost. Okay. Now this snap ring is a challenge, but it's manageable. Gotta try and find the best way to get in here. Rotate it around. Now we will have to vacuum this out again. I used the shop vac. There's your shop tip for the day, Squatch. I used the shop vac to get all the nasty crud out of here after we cleaned out all the holes. So let me rotate the microphone around. Now the front should go fairly similarly. We should be able to tap it into place, hopefully without driving the rear one too far back. So let's see if I can get the camera tilted down enough to where you can see it. And this one we got to be very cautious with because we do not want to hit the threads on that counter shaft. Actually, I got an idea. Well, I don't know if that's going to work too well. Let me do some thinking here. Give me a second. Okay, so here's what I came up with. In order to suspend the counter shaft to align the bore for the bearing, I took a ratchet strap, looped it underneath the counter shaft and around the bottom of the transmission case, and then I slowly raised it into position, and that allowed me to align the bores of the bearing with the shaft and the front of the transmission. So that is in place. Basically what I did was I got the bearing started in the bore and on the shaft, and once that was done I put the snap ring on, because that snap ring kind of acts as the stop. That's how you know your bearing is seated on the front. Once the snap ring was in place, I drove it back until it was seated, and now our countershaft is installed. So the days that we spent getting that countershaft out, it literally took 5 minutes to put it back in. So that's it for the countershaft. Now, to go on from here, one thing I do need to mention is there's a freeze plug or an expansion plug that goes inside here. I could reuse the old ones. I have 2 of them here. I could reuse them, but I have to run to the store anyways. Actually, I probably could if I put some Loctite around this. This one's actually in really good shape. And I know Squatch is probably going to say, you know, why are you going to reuse it? But this one's actually in very nice shape. You know, the edges aren't too bad on it. So I think I'm just going to reuse this. Maybe not. Maybe not. Let's not. I mean, they're definitely reusable, but why waste your time trying to drive it in and get it to seal properly when you can just get a new one for, you know, probably 50 cents to $1. So I'll just get one at the auto store later on today, and essentially you just set it into place. I'll put Loctite around the edge of the expansion plug, set it into place, and then give it a good punch in the center, and that will flatten the plug out and expand it in the hole. So let's see, next on the list is the top shaft, and well, actually we need to install the differential. So let me get this thing vacuumed out. I'll remove this ratchet strap and we'll start installing the differential. Now, one thing that I did notice, the differential carriers, or the pinion carriers, they have a sealing ring in them similar to what's on the PTO, and I was under the misconception that these were no longer available. They are available. You can get them from Steiner and from Case International, and I'm sure there's other suppliers. So Hyatt was actually gracious enough. He's donated so much to this project. He was gracious enough to order them for us, and they're going to be shipped right to our house. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set these up without these sealing rings. So I'm going to remove the sealing rings. We'll set everything up so it's shimmed properly, and then we'll have to pull it out and install the sealing rings. But at least we'll know, you know, where our shim packs lie. I mean, if you look here, there's a ton of shims that I have. So, and there's both thick and thin. So we'll remove these sealing rings. We'll start getting the differential dropped in after I vacuum out the case again, and then we'll go from there. Alright guys, well, I ran out of time, and I only had about 90 minutes to work on this today, so this video is a little bit short, but at least we can break this down into one small segment of how to install the countershaft and reverse idler. So I did go through and I started finding some bolts because I was short on time. I didn't want to begin on the ring and pinion and differential setup because it's going to be a lengthy process, and I really want to cover that well. I also need to pick up a dial caliper from a friend of mine so that we can measure the backlash in the ring and pinion. So real quick, I did count out the shims for each side on the pinion carriers, and I've got 1 thick and 3 thin for both sides. So I'm guessing we're gonna be okay. We might have to take it out once just to either remove a shim from each side, or when we align the pinion to the ring gear, we might have to, make some adjustments either forward and back with the pinion or side to side with the ring gear, because we got to make sure the heels of the gears are meshing correctly. I also, real quick, did install the brake shaft seals. I double sealed both sides, so there's 2 seals here, and there's also 2 seals on this side. It only calls for 1, but you can get 2 in this recession. They don't fit exactly flush, but it's darn close, and I'm going to get twice the sealing protection. So I've got that installed, and those numbers are for Timken seal for the brake seals are a 476838. You can also order them from Steiner, and they are a JDS 1222. So those are your brake seals for the brake shaft itself. And I also went through and installed the Countershaft seal carrier. That's also able to carry a double seal in an SKF. That's a 13602. And from Steiner, it's an ABC 2008. So there's those. This is our input shaft seal carrier. This one you can only fit a single seal in. I did order 2, so now I've got an extra, which isn't the end of the world. If somebody needs an input shaft seal for an H, feel free to let me know and we can work something out. But this number is an 18733 for the transmission input shaft. Let's see, what else do we got here? The axle seals. You're looking at a SKF 25043, also available from Steiner, which I've got here. It's a ABC 1562. There's also a felt seal for the inside of the axle seal carrier, and that goes on the outermost portion of the sealing area. So if you flip this over, you would install first your felt seal and then your seal for, your silicone or Viton, whatever it's made out of. I can't remember, but rubber, I'll call it rubber. Your rubber seal would go inside here, and just by looking at it, I don't think we're going to be able to double seal the axles just by looking at the depth of this recession. Now, Squatch is going to probably shake his finger at me and say I should have measured the seal thickness and then the depth of the casting, but you know what? I've got seals now that I can either keep for spares, or we can use them on another project coming up. As you guys know, we've got that Farmall H that a friend of mine has given to us, so hey, we might be able to use it for that if we ever get around to tearing into that thing. So we covered brake shaft seals, transmission countershaft seals, transmission input shaft seals, axle seals and felts. What else? The seals for the pinion shaft, which is actually a brake drum seal, these are also available from Steiner. They're an ABC 3196 from Steiner. I've also got some Federal Mogul part numbers because I know that we can fit 2 seals in these. And they are a 416444 from Federal Mogul. So those are that. Just trying to get some recap on what else I did. We had to run some errands this evening, so I brought all the bolts that I had for pretty much the transmission, the belly pump. Yeah, and I got all new replacement bolts. A lot of it is grade 8. Some of it that isn't really under a load, like the PTO housing, that'll be standard bolts. But there's a lot of it here, so I do still have to go get some 5/8 washers. I might have some in grade 8, but basically I got all new bolts for, you know, pretty much everything from the top deck to the axle housings to the pinion carriers to, oh boy, a lot. I got a lot of new bolts, so I will need to get more, but this is just a start to get us going with the transmission. So I think that's gonna do it for this episode. Hopefully I tried to cover it as best I could. Again, with this counter shaft, the way that I did it was I removed the bearings from the shaft. I lowered the shaft in rear side first, then front side, got it into the castings or the embossments, and then slid on the front bearing, slid on the rear bearing, and then I drove the rear bearing on with a brass drift until it was seated, installed the snap ring. Then I did the front bearing with the snap ring until it was seated. So everything here should be good. Man, does that turn smooth. Beautiful. Very beautiful. And we did install the new gear that was donated to the project. This is our 4th, 5th driven gear. And then we've also got a new 4th, 5th slider that was donated to the project as well. So that'll get installed after we get the top shaft and, or I should say the pinion shaft and ring gear and differential setup. So the plan is for that, we'll install the shaft with the input shaft and carrier as a unit. We're not going to put any gears on it until we get everything aligned with the differential. So that's about it. That's about all I've got. So yeah, I don't know where else to go from here except to say goodbye. So as always, thanks for watching. Thanks for wrenching with me. If you can, check out the link to the GoFundMe in the description below to support this project, which is ultimately to help raise awareness for suicide and mental health. So with that, I will say goodbye, and we'll see you probably in a couple days. Take care, guys.